look on consolidated assets of the town of Washington. As of 6/30/2017, were $508,086.09. During that same period, the Washington Water Board's consolidated assets were $20,472.98, and the wastewater was $2,323.70. Washington Water Works June usage, we pumped 1,171,900 gallons, backwashed 31,500, leaving us 1,140,400 billable gallons. We billed 674,330 gallons, and we sold an additional 10,500 non-meter, leaving us total gallons treated but not yet billed 455,570. Town income for June 2017 was $29,638.32. The Washington Water Works income during that same period was $9,020.17, and the wastewater revenue was $11,404.08. Cash for the bills to be paid and the additional bills. Really nothing at all unusual in the bills to be paid. Yeah, that's it. We had a couple of pre-approved. This Barco, we approved part of it last month on the additional bills. That was $1,284.70, and that was a pre-approved expense from last month or a month and a half ago for Virginia Rubber Company. Some valves or pumps and things that we needed at the wastewater plant. Hoses, rubber hoses, expensive rubber hoses. And that's all I have here. Pretty light month. And the council got paid, as you can see. It's a big portion of it. Any questions? If none, a motion to approve.
I'll make the motion to approve.
I second.
All in favor? Planning Commission. Got anything?
Nothing on the planning commission. We'll be meeting again in, I'm trying to think of the date up on the head.
We're not having it. Those are on the.
Right, no July meeting, and we're just waiting for any last minute feedback, comments from council.
Is it, I was not the last meeting, but having watched it and read about it, it's my understanding that we intention would be to have a public hearing in September.
Yes.
Am I right on that? So this meeting and the next meeting, we've got to vote on that.
The technicality last time, as I recall it, Mr. Bennett can correct me, before we can have a town advertised public hearing, we have to have a final draft, which means it has to be approved by us, apparently. So, correct?
It has to be a draft that is approved for advertising. What that generally signifies that in good faith, this is what you're offering to the community,
right,
subject to comments now, but advise your thinking.
And why I would have pressed, had we had you present, Mr. Mayor, I probably would have pressed harder. I was not initially inclined to encourage a delay, but Planning Commission felt it was only right that we do more than sort of a cursory glance at this, and Mr. Bennett thought, just to be safe, we really should review it carefully, individually, and then if any of us had any concerns, have at least one more meeting, and then vote that this is the final draft to go to a public hearing.
If I may.
Good, you may.
Thank you. I don't have my calendar with me, so apologies. But we do have a joint meeting set for August.
Council and
Council and planning.
on the council.
And it was fairly early in the month, wasn't it?
Yes.
The 11th?
Yes.
I don't remember the exact date,
Okay.
but the sort of
We
the,
have that set so
We
that
can
we
vote on
can
that.
accept and take in all of your comments, and then we will tweak it. And
What date?
I don't know.
I have September the 11th.
I think it's the 11th.
September or August?
Because
That's
August,
September.
our August meeting is, I think, the 14th.
This was a joint meeting, not a regular. It was for you all were going to sit down or get your comments together, then meet with us. We would
So
That was sort of the
that-
plan, that, to make sure that the Ts are crossed, the Is are dotted, that we would, as a council, be certain that we read it, that it met our expectations, and then we would take essentially formal action to approve it as the final draft, and put it advertising for a public hearing, which we thought might happen sometime in September. Was that the goal, to have a
Yes.
public hearing in September?
Yeah, seems to me, yes.
So the
So,
public hearing would be,
But we do have
September
an August
11th.
joint meeting.
Well-
September 11th, and then we would officially vote on it a month later, correct? Unless we chose not to.
well, that was what confused me. We have to vote on it initially
Or
to get it to a public hearing, and
Can
then
we
we
vote
vote
after
after
the
the public hearing.
I think we can vote after the
You
public
can vote
hearing.
after the public.
Well, that's when we adopted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
You can
what
vote
had
to
me,
have it.
what had me confused, I didn't think we actually had to take that vote until after the public hearing, but apparently in good faith, it should essentially be what we're proposing to adopt when it gets advertised and goes to the public hearing. So essentially, that means it's got to be done. We can't sort of hold our,
Well-
comments back and wait to do it later. I think.
that's right.
Well, and I had a conversation with Fred Catlin, who said all he cared about was that once it goes to the public hearing, there not be any stitches that come loose. That was my phrase, not his. But he wanted to make sure that from the public hearing on, it was smooth sailing. So if we had any concerns, they need to be addressed before we announce the public hearing.
Well, you want
That's
to
what
take
the
the
public
public.
can get comments into.
Oh, yeah. I mean, if there's something, right, we reserve the authority to review it after the public hearing. Obviously, that's why you have a public hearing. But the point is, there's a difference between what comes up in a public hearing and one of us saying, oh, I just noticed this and we need to change this. Although we can still do that, I think. Mr. Bennett's point is, it's better to err on the side of caution and have us go through our work first, so there won't be any surprises.
I'm losing track here a little bit. Why can't we just have at our next town council meeting, joint meeting with the planning commission?
I think that's what's scheduled.
Is that what's planned? And then,
So we should
and that should be the last time
For the
town
public.
council members
Comment.
have to comment on it,
Right.
unless there's some
Yeah.
major thing, until really after the public hearing, and if people change their minds about what they're doing.
Now, that is what, I'm just going back. to the
August
notes.
14th, right? Right, joint meeting on the 14th, at the end of that meeting, hopefully.
Laura, do we
we'll
need
push
to-
it towards the public hearing at the next.
Do we have a motion that it's going to be a public meeting, or can we just have a public, not
If
public,
you're already
joint?
having a council meeting, so you can agree that this is going to be an agenda item, I don't think you
Let's
have,
just put it on the agenda.
I don't think you have to vote on having a joint meeting if it's not going to be on the regular. I mean, I don't think you have to vote if it's not going to be a regular meeting.
It should be a formal joint meeting, because at the end of that
Yeah.
meeting,
Right.
the planning commission has to formally recommend whatever ends up, if the planning commission so chooses, to the council, so then it can be voted upon by the council for a formal public hearing.
Do we need to do anything
Well, let's just,
right now?
let's just do it and then we're covered. So I'll move that the next town council meeting be a joint meeting on our regular date with the planning commission. And then an agenda item be a review of the proposed comprehensive plan. And the date would be the July 14th?
August.
August
14th.
Sorry, August 14th,
17.
Okay.
at 7
All right,
p.m.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Let's roll call vote.
Oh, roll call.
Roll call, okay.
Right.
Aye.
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 I'm not sure it's okay, A or B, there's nothing to report, there's no meeting this month, there's no applications. Since I just saw Sean, did I see you, Sean, walk in there? I would like to make a report to you. At one of the more recent meetings, several times you raised the question about the church bells. And would they be ringing again? For those of you who have not noticed, they ring every 15 minutes, which I happen to think is beautiful. Maybe not everybody does. And on 4th of July, they played God Bless America or some such song. But anyway, I just want you to know the response to you. Well, we really just gone down. Mr. Bennett, do you have anything other than we're getting the election things?
No.
Old business, in fact, we've just done that.
Question though, at the end of the meeting last month, the question was raised about whether your work to date, your last proposal, is online. Has it been added to the?
It should be out there.
It should be online, okay.
I'll
Thank
double
you.
check when we look at it.
I want to once again compliment you folks. I have before, I will again. It's really, went through it again yesterday. It's really good. Good piece of work. All right, new business. Let's talk about the election issue before we talk about the OSHA. Just because I know some people won't leave, if that's okay.
Do I recall that there was some question about council wanting to consider referring to the planning commission some specific language, or at least a concern about how the comprehensive plan might deal with or anticipate Airbnb and any other kinds of
You're right. I apologize.
well,
Don't
it just
remember that.
seemed to me that that might be something we want to do tonight.
And we were going to turn it back and forth on that.
Some.
And I think we
John's gonna
Well, having raised my own view, and I think it was discussed at least one meeting about the comp plan, I don't see that as appropriate for a comprehensive plan. I think the language in the comprehensive plan clearly and specifically points to the vision, the goal, and all the things that a comprehensive plan should. Having said that, I do think that the council might want to refer to our attorney the question, should we consider an ordinance that has very specific language in light of the bill that the governor apparently signed, so that we're not caught flat-footed just in case. So that would be my preference. Keep it out of, I think that's the kind of fact-specific issue that today seems very important. 5 years from now, no one may remember it, or it could become even a more significant problem. But I think the way to deal with it as the town is not to put it in the comp plan, but to ask Mr. Bennett if he would review that and see if there's a need or any reason we might want to consider adopting a very specific ordinance that would be worded to reflect the changes that have been made as a result of the act of the legislature. That would be
Well,
my...
those are my thoughts precisely, that it doesn't belong in the comp plan because it's just so detailed that it should be in the ordinance. But if you look at the ordinance and if you look at the evolution of Airbnb, we've sort of gone full circle. 25 years ago, people were renting rooms in their homes, and they were like mom and pop B&Bs. And so, and they were like tourist homes. Then they were called B&Bs. Then they became more sophisticated in people. The B&B industry became more like inns rather than mom and pop B&Bs. And now we've come all the way full circle to people opening up rooms in their homes. And I think our ordinance, if you look at it, doesn't it cover tourist homes and that sort of thing? The only thing that's different from Airbnbs and B&Bs is air.
Well,
Those words.
here's the difference, and
Because they offer lodging, they offer
Right.
breakfast, they can offer wine,
but
and they have to get a license.
I believe, and you can correct me because you have the history here, I believe that it's been the tradition in this county at least, that where those rooms were made available to the public, to transients, to guests, whatever you want to call them, they were in the home of somebody who was resident there. For me, the biggest difference is that people can come in and buy property and put it online and never step foot in the county. The owners. Never. They don't have to ever have passed through here. They just buy it.
Those are more like vacation rentals by owner.
Well, they can be, but they
Yeah.
can, if you look at what's happened in other areas with Airbnb,
Yeah.
that's the problem.
And it's happening in the county, I mean, that very issue.
Does our ordinance say that it has to, there has to be a resident in there, or?
I think it's implied, but I don't, again, I want to review that.
But
But
we have
from
B&Bs.
the last time I looked
Like the
at
White
it,
Moose and
well, the
everything.
White Moose is different. It's the only one of the several that's not owner occupied. It also changes, by the way, it's not just us and our ordinances. If you look at the Americans with Disability Act, in a very obscure hidden footnote, B&Bs of 5 or fewer rooms that are owner occupied are not subject.
Right.
So the White Moose is, but the Gay Street Inn and Middleton Inn and Foster Harris are not. So I'm just saying that those things, there are places where owner occupied.
The spal's not owner occupied.
Right. Who? The spa.
No, it's not, and you also granted it to Miss Windsor, but
Miss
she has
Windsor,
not,
yes.
she has never used it.
Yeah, but we granted it to her also as non-owner occupied.
Miss Windsor would count as owner occupied.
No, she was going to rent it out, and she wasn't going to use
She
it.
wasn't.
On the weekends that she wasn't resident, that was the original plan. That, I believe, would still count as owner occupied. It's her home. She lives there. When she's not there, I mean, now it's fine lines. But the ones I'm clearly concerned about are where people buy them with no intention of ever being resident. They buy them simply because it's economically prudent. It's a good business investment. They can make a ton of money. You take something that was a rental, and you can quadruple the income.
Essentially, it's an investment.
Right. And that's where our ordinance maybe needs to be tweaked. I believe you could argue we already covered it, but I wouldn't want to have to.
We should look at it. I'm concerned with it.
But yeah, he's our
I
attorney.
don't think that issue is clear from the existing ordinance.
No, I'm saying I think you could weasel it. And I'd rather we not do
I
that.
don't want to say anything at this
All
point,
right,
but
you'll take a look at it?
I think it'd be good to roll up sleeves and look at the specifics.
John, will you take a look at it and we discuss this again at the next meeting? It is a big subject.
But are we agreed, is there consensus that it's better to go this route than to try and put it into the comprehensive plan?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You guys.
I agree with that.
Okay, on to the issue of potentially changing the election date. John today just began to look away at the new statutes, regs, whatever the appropriate word. I think wants to think about just what he can or can't do. And we're certainly not about to make a decision here. But it does seem to me it is worth having a discussion as to whether people are open to the idea or not. And really, what are some of the questions that we might have that we need answers to before we can actually make an intelligent decision? Of course, we would make a decision without going through public hearings and all the things that one needs to do. So this is a very early discussion.
I was going to say, could we have Judy talk about this? Because you were the one that brought it up.
Well, the General Assembly passed a statute this year saying that municipalities can change without altering their charter, have permission by passing an ordinance, not doing this solicitor, to move their election to the time of, and it was my understanding, another either statewide or federal election. So you'll have permission to move it to when there is already an election. So to me, it makes sense to do it in the year of a gubernatorial election because that's a state election and municipalities. And interestingly, they grandfathered in the year 2000 people who had just gone ahead and
already
done
done it anyway.
And evidently, the majority of municipalities have moved their elections. So it would in fact save $4,000. I'm unclear if we pay for that election or it just saves the county $4,000.
I asked Kimberly McKiernan this morning,
And what she said.
and they currently charge us $4,000
Right.
as a stand, and we reimburse them. If they were to do it at the same time, we would probably be charged some minimal amount
To print the
as a percentage proportion of what they do for us, what they do for the county. So technically, you might not say $4,000, it might be $3,500 or something.
So if you moved it to this year, then you'd be on the ballot with here. There aren't any, this year, Hampton doesn't have any board of supervisors or school board officers up. So it would just be the gubernatorial, the state house, and perhaps Washington. Or you could wait and do it next year. And of course, the reason I think it's prudent to do it this year is that shortens your term, which I think is more politically palatable than lengthening your term.
Well, it may also be the only legal way to do it, because as I was thinking about, again, I defer, but as I was thinking about this, I think we technically all have to, anyone who was elected, I was appointed, so I'm filling out an unexpired term, but people who were elected would have to resign as of a date, like the day, midnight of the day of the election. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to sync the terms. There have to be vacancies that people could lawfully vote on. And since our terms would run beyond, wouldn't they, the date?
Well, perhaps the ordinance can address that, Jerry. I don't know.
Yeah, but I think that would be the tricky, two things. What would it cost us as a town council to actually make the change? Apparently we save money. I'm all in favor of saving.
Probably.
And I would even be in favor of moving to a general election day, even if it costs us a little something. I've always wondered about the anomaly, and I do think, even though we're a very, very small municipality, we probably could do better than 29 voters. 31. Oh, excuse me. Wow.
What is the,
What a jump in voter turnout.
what's the timeline of coming up with a new ordinance, public hearings, getting it approved by November? Would be tough.
It's doable.
It'd be,
Tight, but doable.
I don't think you could get it on the ballot for this November. Well, no, you couldn't.
Why?
Because typically things have to be finalized and into the Board of Elections 60 days prior to the election.
Wait a minute.
So,
I was
Well, let's let
confused
John
by Jerry's
vote on
question.
that. I don't think.
You don't have to put the ordinance on the ballot.
No, we passed the
You
ordinance.
do that. Okay, 60 days before, I honestly don't know what that is.
I know that's the rule for referenda, because I was involved in a couple of those over the years. The court order's got to be in more than
So you
60
would need
days.
to have,
That's sort of
We
administrative.
have to change our charter for the
Next month.
public.
No, you
No,
don't.
you don't.
That's the point, you don't have to change the charter.
That's
That's
the
all.
We have to,
You have
As
to
long as
adopt,
we just decide.
you
Yeah.
have to adopt.
Oh, no.
It used to be we
No.
had to.
That's the whole.
So,
we have to adopt an ordinance though? Well, that's
so
what I'm
if we
talking
put
about,
it,
double
if
ones.
we agreed in August and had a public hearing, do we have to have a public hearing on North? Yes.
I would think so.
And then in September, we could vote to make the change with all, whatever the details are. And that would still give you the 60 days notice to the November, wouldn't it? Isn't my math
I
right?
think we have to count the,
well, you're pretty close, but.
Yes, it's tight, but I think it's doable.
Yeah, there's going to be a public hearing, so there are people who are going to want to run. They're probably going to put it a public hearing, and of course you would publicize it well. You don't have to get signatures on a
No.
petition or anything, you just have to go file the papers.
Well, clearly there's some details we have to know.
September.
Now, does this, Judy, would this have to be accepted at Richmond?
No,
We're making-
No.
This is at the county level that we're making
Is that-
state change.
At our level, town level.
Well, it's the town, but I'm saying,
no.
nobody else has to recognize and say it's okay.
That was the change.
To me, there's two large elements. Why do it? One, it saves money. Two, one would think it would increase turnout, which to me would be good. You can maybe argue with it, but sort of assumption, increase turnout, which is I think we are all, having said that, I think we're all sensitive to the fact that we don't want this to be perceived as some kind of power play. The council's doing something, it's good for it. And so if we were to do it, how we do it, aside from, in addition to doing it legally, that's also important to do in that way.
Council has no staggered terms, right? Mayor, treasurer elected at the same time as council members. And they're all 4-year terms. So the same day, everyone on council is elected, theoretically. So that makes it a little simpler.
I didn't hear
Well, we come in as, it's not like in some places where you have staggered terms on the council. So
Oh, right.
So at least in terms of
It does
public
make it
understanding, it makes it simple. If we move forward with this, if we can do it by this November, everyone currently sitting would be up for either re-election or there'd be new people coming on council as a result of that election.
Well, let me say a few things about what this I read through the ordinance today, and, you know, contrary to what you might think, it does not shorten any terms, it lengthens the terms so that any city member would serve through that space until January 1 following the November election.
Well, it doesn't really lengthen the terms if you do it this year. Because the election was in May or April.
The election would be in,
So
election,
you can't shorten the terms.
Yeah.
You can't shorten the terms.
That's why I said we'd have to resign.
You can't shorten the terms under this ordinance, that the E, no term of a mayor or member of a council shall be shortened in implementing the change to November election date.
And
So
you'll have to-
that's what they,
so if you did the following November, we would be lengthening.
Right.
yeah. I just counted the days, it'd be 56 days if you did it on.
But how do you serve beyond your elected term?
That's what the General Assembly has said. That's,
So even though these terms expire in May, General Assembly can
Actually, June 30th.
June
just to be
30th.
Precise.
Right.
enact the legislature and her
well, the
treaty.
lawyer, that is one of the first things I ask myself.
Well,
Clearly, this is not going to get resolved tonight. We have a competent
John
attorney.
work on it.
Yes, let's let John work on it.
and
That's
I think it's worth
Yes.
a conversation with either the lawyer of the General Assembly or the head of the Board of Elections for clarification. They have just asked us to send in clarification questions for all the election stuff because they're all a mess.
Well, I've always thought it seemed sort of, I know there's a history for it, which I cannot articulate, but I always thought it was just unusual that there was just one day, only this town had its little election.
I don't know about the
You would think
specific
it'd
history
be
here, but
another,
when I used to teach elections, there was a time when local citizens were very concerned that their elections not be swamped by issues that went beyond the
well,
law.
that's, Mr. Bennett's brought that up. It's a very interesting point.
Yeah,
Question.
I spoke with French Slaughter way back because this is something that other jurisdictions considered when French and I were law partners before he went to the House of Representatives. And, you know, he was very active in a lot of the state legislation way back when. And he said this was done very deliberately at town elections and county elections to the extent they could back then, completely removed as far as they could from the November process because they wanted the people focused on local matters, you know, how's the grass growing in this yard compared to this yard, rather than the winds of some bigger election. So it was a very deliberate process to require towns to, they knew it was going to cost them money, but yet that's the direction the General Assembly went.
Well, let's find out what would be involved and we can discuss it intelligently.
Anyway, I wanted to get it out on the table, out in the public. The second and last item actually on the new business, Brad, OSHA, Office of Safety and whatever, has passed a number of regulations, often known as OSHA, at least the name, but similar. Passed a number of regulations, in, I guess in the last year or two, or three, I forget precisely, that now apply to a lot of things, but not the least of which is our wastewater plant. And ESS, our contractor, who's responsible for running it, came by 2 weeks ago or so, and Brad and Laura and I met with Don Hurdle as well as their chief safety person to get a sense of the magnitude of what was going to be required to be done. It's something we have no choice with. And Brad was extremely helpful, and his experience in this area is extremely valuable. And talking with Don and his number two person about how the problems might be solved in various ways that A, accomplish goals, but B, you know, the sense of cost consciousness and safety. We had hoped to have a one-page memo from Don today, sort of summarizing things, but he's been on vacation. And there's nothing to vote on tonight. There's no proposal per se, but it's really to alert everybody that this is something we have to do. It's going to go over a course of months, I guess, wouldn't it, Brad?
So,
Let me just turn it to you.
well, basically, there's two issues. One is an issue of labeling. It's a whole series of labels and stickers and this kind of thing for something called arc flash. It's basically just a electrical safety. And it's been going through the industry, you know, different industries at different rates. Water and wastewater systems typically are sort of last in all these kinds of things. So that's one issue. It's very specific and what is labeled, how it's labeled. Things have to be tested and checked in order to get the right labeling on each box and conductor and things like that. So that's one issue. The other is a series of physical barriers that are either not in place or deemed inadequate. So that's the other side of things. You're going to have to put, you know, a safety gate in a place that's just an opening. There's some platforms that need a little more, you know, protection, and just a series of these kinds of issues.
Any rough estimate of cost?
No. Well, that's part of what we're working toward for the next meeting is to have some estimates. I'm working with Don on one of the areas that we looked at in terms of a barrier that we'd actually remove and put in something different that would actually add additional protection to the equipment in the plant itself. So there's a whole series of different things, and I just sent an email to Don this morning with the suggestion of, you know, how we might look at some readily available products as opposed to having somebody custom fabricate things, so that we can maybe optimize the speed at which it's implemented, the cost, and the fact that some of these items that we purchase are already designated as OSHA compliant, so they just have to be installed, whereas if we fabricate
Then they
something,
have to be inspected.
they have to be inspected and checked, and if it's not right, you have to fix them. So hopefully by, you know, the next council meeting, we'll have some estimates, and we're looking at kind of a time frame. We're not under a time restriction to get it done, but we have to indicate we are making those actions.
Well, clearly we have no choice. This is the way this works. My concern is, as we struggle to try and get both the water system and the wastewater and to balance revenue to expense, water looks like it's on the horizon. Wastewater is still a challenge, and this is going to make that challenge even greater.
Yes and no. It's not significant. I mean, we're not talking about having to put out hundreds of thousands of dollars.
And is it, the labeling, I assume, is a one-time fix?
Labels are
Is the other requirement also going to be sort of do it, pay for it, and you're done?
Done, yes.
All right.
Yes. And there's some other things that we're looking at. Again, Don and I spent, after the meeting, he and I discussed this further. So there's a whole sort of a tier of things. This needs to be done. We have to do this. This is something we should add. This is something we should add. And they can be implemented a little bit over time.
I agree with the mayor wholeheartedly. It's heartening to know that there's somebody on the council that actually has some expertise in this area.
I felt.
And who also has it, shares my
There was
concern
a
for
conversation,
fiscal.
Laura and I looked at each other and said, "Brad, Brad's here."
The idea of going.
And Brad, and just as a personal note, Brad and Don seem to hit it off very well and work well together, which is, of course, important in these kind of things.
Yeah, I would support your idea that to the extent we can use something that's already been approved and has been tested and the kinks are out, and we know that once we do it, it meets the standard.
Right.
I would much support that over the idea of us trying to custom something.
The other thing that will happen over the next couple of weeks when I have available time, and this was discussed with Don and the safety guy, is I'm going to do some house cleaning. We are accumulating junk, boards,
Yeah.
pipes, and other stuff. And so I'm going to literally load it up and haul it to the dump, because one of the things that when OSHA inspectors, EPA inspectors, DEQ inspectors come is they look at your housekeeping. And if you've got lousy housekeeping, then they immediately think, well, I need to go dig deeper. If everything is neat, clean, tidy, they tend to be less, investigative. They figure that you're running a well, and we've just gotten a little lazy, so that'll get done over the next couple of weeks.
Mark, all right, if nothing else, we open the public forum for discussion of any subject. Anyone might be inclined to want to make observations, questions? John?
The hand railing for the corner, the hand railing for the corner by the church on the walkway, so that elderly people can get up there without crawling up the steps. I've seen them crawling.
Sharon has raised a question with me a couple weeks ago, that on the corner of Gay and Main, where Trinity Church is, that there are some steps that go up from the street, and for quite some number of years there's never been a railing, but it is unsafe, or could be, and something should be done about it.
You're talking about the corner of Gay and Middle.
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry, I said Main, not Palm, Gay and Middle. It's right at the corner where Trinity Church is.
And there is a sidewalk on that corner.
Yeah, and people can, and presumably do, walk up or down those steps, and they're modestly steep. And it's something that should be fixed. It's the classic example of whose responsibility really isn't to get it fixed, with various kinds of legal implications. But it's, again, one of those examples where I think you just figure out a way to get it done.
Well, I don't want to steal kind of thunder, but we've been down this road on 3 or 4 different sidewalks. And much as I dislike the conclusion, I've been forced to agree that once we begin as a town to accept responsibility for any sidewalk, and have not fully explored how the sidewalk was put in and whether it's on the right of way and whether it belongs to, whether there's actually state or county requirement that people who have sidewalks on their property are required for the maintenance thereof. I mean, it seems like such a simple thing, we should fix it. But you have sidewalks down Mount Salem that have been complained about for years. You have parts of sidewalks in other parts of town. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I've heard you say on at least 2 occasions, we should not casually begin to sort of think of these as one-offs, because once the town accepts either responsibility or liability, we may be accepting liability by doing anything to improve it, which is always the catch-22. If someone tripped on the sidewalk because it's uneven, if somebody stepped in a pothole because it's not being filled, all these things come to mind. So before, again, I hate to keep piling stuff on Mr. Bennett, but before we do anything to accept even the idea that the town has a responsibility for maintaining the safety or security of sidewalks in the town of Washington, I really think we need to have a pretty definitive statement from the town's attorney.
What happened to that corner, I say, white loose end?
It's just sitting there because
Nobody can decide.
well, because nobody, the last conversation with Abbott was that you should talk to VDOT. It's an interesting challenge, it strikes me. There is the law, and the law is important, and one doesn't want to break the law. But if you have space, which we do in this town, where there's a debate as to who's responsible for something, then sometimes nothing happens.
And we could talk to the church and see if they're willing to match their existing agreement.
Well, the church already, just as an aside, the church already spent some money fixing
The landscaping.
well, not just the landscaping, the sidewalk. And they first approached us because everybody assumes that we own these things. And let's just say it got solved. And the town didn't bear any burden with that. So it's just one of those things that you know, it's a VDOT, it's a property owner, who's going to decide, you work yourself in so many knots, at some point nothing gets done. So it's, you know, I agree with what you said, and I'm also saying.
My concern is not with the cost of putting up a railing. My concern is that if we try and fix one problem and then,
Well, I understand your point.
and then someone trips and we have a multi-million-dollar
responsibility for it. It's never undertaken any affirmative duty to maintain them, doesn't claim any right to maintain them. That this is something that's on private property and would be incumbent upon property owner. Their property owner would be, if they have homeowners insurance, would be covered under their homeowners policy.
But then there's the element of what if it's on VDOT property.
And it's on VDOT property, they sue the state.
What?
You'd have to sue the state. Then you get into questions about sovereignty, you know.
But then you get a question of sovereign, who controls it, and by the time you finish with it, everybody is so wrapped up in legal this, they never get done.
Well,
I mean, I'm not saying I'm just trying to, there's two sides to this thing. Nothing has actually frustrated me more than,
Well,
I say, how many years in mayors, the parts is like, no one will figure out who's going to.
What about the town of Culpeper? Who's responsible for the sidewalks there?
well, that's different because they're a jurisdiction that's over 3,500 and they have a public works department that's charged with maintaining their streets, you know, all that equipment, snow removal, all of that, as well as the sidewalks.
and they probably installed the sidewalks.
Yeah,
Who installed the sidewalks?
That's one of the questions.
Who knows?
you know, I've never come across anything that showed that the town made an assessment on property owners to put in sidewalks. That's the way it's normally done.
And that's the next big step. If we assume that the town has the authority and responsibility, then the way you finance that is you levy a fee, a tax on a homeowner.
Frontage fee.
A what fee?
A frontage fee.
So anyone that owns property that adjoins a town street would then have a fee, and then the town would have to subcontract out, because we don't have any regular staff, people who would come in and would put in sidewalks and annually inspect them and repair them. But we don't have a budget for that, nor do we have a workforce to do that.
But let me just, out of curiosity, I'm not really suggesting, if the town were to assume such responsibility, would we necessarily have to tax the citizens? I mean, what does it keep us from saying we're going to spend $5,000 a year fixing sidewalks and other odds and ends?
I think if you want to take it out of general revenue, well, our general revenue is actually most logically that's appropriate. That's one of the reasons I told everyone we asked to walk up the middle of the street, it's the safer way to walk. But
More fun, too.
well, probably, and you see more folks. But the you know, we have been. You go back to the records. The all-female town council. Apparently, one of the things that was a big issue back then was sidewalks and getting debris out of the gullies and gutters of the streets.
Getting trash.
So it's not a new issue. I do think that maybe it is time that if we want to go to the next step, sort of the next era of the town, and begin to take some responsibility for these things and figure out a way to pay for them, then you have a program. You start with Gay Street, you start with Main Street, you start with Middle Street, whatever you do, and eventually we'd have decent sidewalks that are maintained. But I do think it's with all due respect, I agree with you too. I'd hate to see someone trip because there's nowhere to have a handrail up some steps.
They were crawling.
But it isn't a one-off.
But that's, I could make this, if it is clear, if this particular case is absolutely clear that it's on Trinity Church property, then the answer is tell Trinity Church to fix it. Which is so simple. Fine. The question is it on Trinity Church property or not? And these things never fully get answered.
The benchmark is fairly clear to be able to look at this plat.
Yeah.
Right, and find out, look at the plan, how many feet the
Where it ends, and is the sidewalk inside?
I don't know if we can do it here, but once upon a time I was involved in some of these things, and you literally go back and try and find who paid to install the sidewalk. Because without a sidewalk, you walk on grass, there's no assumption of liability or responsibility. If you put in a facility and you invite the public to use it as a public way, and you don't restrict it, you don't stop the public from on it, then you have certain legal obligations if through your negligence someone injures himself. Now the first question would be who put in the sidewalk. The second one would be, is it negligent not to have a handrail? And then you get to who would pay to be a lawsuit. It is always liability that drives these issues. It's not the maintenance even, it's not the installation. It's once you do something that accepts your oversight of a facility that invites the public to use it, if the public uses it and alleges that they're injured because of some neglect or negligence on the owner's part, then you open yourself to enormous claims. And I don't know whether we, as a municipality, enjoy sovereign immunity, but I know our insurance is not for that. So, again, part of the answer might be, if we take the next step, do we then begin to think about entering into an insurance policy that will protect the town from claims of negligence for the maintenance of our property? I just think it's while I believe everyone on this table wants a handrail at those steps tonight, I just think it's a larger issue than one pothole or one raised piece of sidewalk or one handrail. And I've been more with you, Mayor. You know me. I'd like to get it done. But I keep having this lawyer next to me saying, don't go there.
This is the debate that's come up the whole time I've been here.
All right, and then nothing gets solved.
Why
Yeah,
don't we-
Let's just talk.
I've said the same thing consistently.
All let's hear on that, whether they want.
Just ask them.
They don't
have this conversation.
Yeah.
I noticed that the sidewalk is extension in the front of the church, and they do have hand railings to get up the stairs there from the street. And those are very nice, and it would look, to me, I went to the church first. I went to the church first because I thought, okay, well, if they have the handrails for this, maybe they can put one there. Because, I mean, I was going to go and help the people get up the stairs, but when they started crawling, I thought it would just embarrass them. So I backed off because I didn't want to embarrass them that somebody actually saw them crawling up the steps there. So I was, you know.
Thank goodness you didn't put it on Facebook.
Why? I don't pay.
I think we've done the second.
Let's just, the church can fix it.
Well,
But I did
If
approach
they
the
do
church
it,
first.
if
and
it's
they
on
said
their
they
property.
wanted it.
Well, they still might be willing to do it if they want to match the rail.
Pertinent to their property.
It's just one little rail. It's not a rail. Somebody stick it there.
Just ask them to do it. Just match it with the rest of the railings and make it look like it's supposed to be. I'll take care of it. Tell them to put bring those bells out.
right. All right. Any other? Good. Close.
Come on.
Just one. I'm so sorry. I noticed that when we had the really big rains, and it rained for a lot, and we had a lot of rain, everywhere I went, not just here in town of Washington, but everywhere I went, you could smell the septic was starting to ooze back everywhere. And, you know, we've had guests come into town and everything, and you could start to really smell the stench of the septic everywhere. And so, I mean, this is not just here, but everywhere. Everybody's septics were,
What do you mean everywhere?
Where?
I mean, like if I went to Spurryville, if I went to other places, I mean, all
It should
around
be
the
the
whole
case here.
area.
We
don't
don't
have
have
septic.
information here.
But I mean, I could smell the, you know, the odor of, like the septic things. It was so much water that I guess it was just, I mean, what was it, like 9 inches of rain in 2 days?
But no one in town has a septic field anymore.
I know,
Yeah.
but it was you could
Well,
smell.
I'll only observe that I didn't smell anything.
Yeah, and the type sewer system we
No
have
one's gonna
is
find that.
designed in such fashion
God's
that it's
responsibility.
very unlikely that anything like that could happen because we have a sort of a pressurized system instead of having one that's just gravity infill.
And one right there by the Trinity Church, that was smelling really hard one time, and we had, we got other people come along and check. And call the people that you called to come and check it out, because it
I would propose
there
that we-
was quite a bit of odor there from that old tank thing with the light. So they did go and check the situation. It was like water or something coming out of it.
Mary, you tell me.
Any other? All right, let's close the public hearing.
Are we going into session?
No.
Well, we need to get on these checks.
You
Mayor, would it be appropriate if I just?
want to say something? Yeah.
concrete discussions with an interested party, and we're at the stage to move to a contract that they now need to employ some professionals to see if their proposed uses, how it would fit onto the lot. They need land planners or surveyor or whatever. So we've had that conversation. As soon as they get past employing those professionals and get something done, which this is the busiest time of year for all of them. We understood
Is
that.
this the same people? Same people.
And we understood when we had a conversation weeks ago that they wouldn't be ready for this meeting. So that's where it is.
Thank you.
Any questions? And then, if not, do I have a motion to, we are finished, adjourn meeting?